Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 63. Now, normally we start by talking about the card from last weekend, but let's be real, no one watched that fight night at the Apex. And of course, the Apex Center is something we're going to be talking about in a bit. But first, as we just said before we punched record, UFC 305 is next week. And strangely, there's not a lot of hype around it online, and I'm not really sure why, but I want to hear your predictions all the same. So hit me with your main event analysis right from the get.
I did watch the fight night, by the way, yesterday.
One of two people then.
Or at least I watched the prelims and then I fell asleep, Googled the results in the morning. Was there anything that I needed to go back and have a look at? Not really. The main event submission. And you know what's
nice
strange though? Yeah, the first armbar finish in 4 years, I believe, at heavyweight.
A heavyweight, I was going to say.
Little stat for you.
But not as common as people think, by the way, armbars.
Nah. Well,
I saw a statistic of all submissions in the UFC. Not very common.
I think that's because that's day one submission, right? So now when you get day one submission, it also becomes your day one defense. So people get
it's also very high risk. From top,
yeah, that's the thing.
Armbars you never see.
But talking about high risk,
very good.
Dricus Plessis, Israel Adesanya. There's nothing I say online that gets more hate than when I pronounce Israel's name. Honest to God, it follows me throughout the internet. I can be on a completely random post, live stream, collaborating with a random creator, whatever it is. People come into the comments of the video and always pick up on it. But what I always say is, that's actually how to pronounce his name. But it creates this extensive discourse in the comments, so I don't really care too much. But getting into the fight, do you want me to go first or you to go first?
You go first, because you always tend to say everything I'm probably going to say anyway. So,
well, hopefully we disagree.
Usually in agreement. We're usually in pretty agreement for most fights, I feel. So
hopefully we disagree.
I'm intrigued.
But what we won't disagree on is the fact that it's a good matchup. I think we can agree on that because it's very fun. It probably should have been made maybe last year. I think that would be fair to say that is a little bit overdue. I think that's maybe why there's not as much hype around it, because if you think of Izzy, you think of one of the biggest superstars in the sport, one of the most active champions. And of course, he's had a little bit of a lull in his career because the recent loss to Sean Strickland, and now he's coming back off a mini hiatus or a long hiatus by his standards because he's been so active. But when you look at this fight, Dricus is that guy you can never count out. And as soon as I watched his debut performance, and then I watched him against Trevin Giles, and then I watched him against the next person and the next person, I just said, right, there's no way I'm counting this man out. And I think it's very easy to look at his style and think it's a bit herky-jerky, think it's a little bit unorthodox and just to write him off completely. But I think Sean Strickland versus Izzy is a good precedence to suggest we can't do that. You have to actually look at the skill sets. And when you look at the skill sets of Dricus, whilst he's not the cleanest, he's most certainly very, very effective, whether it be in the grappling and whether it be in the striking. Now, I wouldn't say he's lights out in particularly anything. Apart from maybe his power, I would say he's probably lights out in that. But apart from that, I would say he's very well-rounded. He's good everywhere. That's exactly what you need to be a champion. Now, we can get into the X and O's a little bit deeper, but just on the surface level of this breakdown, the way I see this fight going, I'm not too sure. But for the longest time, my intuition has just been telling me this is Israel versus Derek Brunson vibes. That's what I've been seeing when I've been seeing this fight. And I'm not counting Dricus out because I genuinely do believe he has the power to go out there and change the fight with one punch. I do believe he can mix up the grappling at least enough to have Izzy second-guessing his hands and to also get some control and steal rounds. Do I think he'll take him down and submit him? I don't think he will. But do I think he can take him down and secure a round in 1, 2, 3 rounds? I think he can probably do that. But Israel's a different beast when his back's against the wall. And the fact that he's had some time away, the fact that he's been working on his strength and conditioning, and the fact that I know behind the scenes he'll be really diving into what went wrong the last couple of fights, I can't help but think his striking is just going to be sharper than ever. I think he's going to look to take the front foot. I think he's going to look to take the center of the octagon, not look to counter strike or move laterally too much. I think he's not going to try and be pushed around in this, because I think he knows Dricus is going to come out and try and do that, because that's always his MO. I think he's going to look to dictate the pace, set his hands first, not counter strike, actually be the first man to strike. And I think he's going to be able to pick up on the reads and the timings of when Dricus dips off. Now, it's hard to get that because it's not always that consistent, but I do think he's going to look for those level changes, and I do think he tends to find himself in awkward positions when he does strike. I'm not saying it can't be effective, but I'm saying someone as sharp as Izzy can pick up on that. So I honestly think he's going to be able to time whether it's a high kick, whether it's a knee, very, very similar to Derek Brunson, and I think he'll be able to hurt Dricus. So if it... I'm just getting straight into my predictions. I've gone into the full flow of it. But yeah. I think if Izzy wins, I think it's going to be within 3 rounds. I think it will be a TKO.
It has to be. It has to be. I think the longer that goes, the easier it is for Dricus to win.
And I think the longer it goes, the more I'm going to favour the decision of Dricus. And like I said, not necessarily he just steals the show and runs off with it, but his fighting IQ is very high, and he does a great job of knowing how to win rounds, how to give good optics to the judges. So that's how I see that going. But let me flip it back over to you. What are you thinking?
I mean, as you just said, like with the decision making that affects the judges' decisions, I completely agree with that. That was really a lot of the reason why he won that fight against Sean Strickland. It was power over volume. He might have landed less, but he hit a hell of a lot harder, and that swayed him the decision. I thought he won that fight. I know it's a contentious decision, but he got the nod, and he's the champion, and rightfully so. And you're right. When you said earlier about being a fun matchup, I think any Dricus du Plessis fight is going to be fun because there's no one who fights like him. So it's every fight he has, every new opponent he faces, it's always a different test. It's something new that fans haven't seen. And he hasn't fought a guy like Adesanya either. So this is always going to be exciting. You know, I agree with what you said. I do wish we had it before with Adesanya as the champion, because it just has a bit more of a narrative flourish, I suppose. But I can't complain. We're getting it. It's here. It's for a belt, except it's the other side. Dricus is, of course, now the king. And cardio-wise, I still think people are sleeping on Dricus. I just really do. People are just counting him out. He set such a high pace over 25 minutes, and he really reiterated this point. This is something I picked up on after the Strickland fight, was how good he felt in there in the championship rounds. He was acknowledging that whilst he was in the fight, in between rounds, to his corner, saying, I feel great. This is where I'm meant to be. And he didn't look out of place. He looked completely at home in the 4th and the 5th round. And that is the deciding factor, I think, in this fight, is whether he can just keep that pace up, survive that early attack. Because I do agree, I think Adesanya will, favor the forward foot, no counter-striking, really try and set the pace. So it's a matter of whether Dricus can really withstand that early offensive and take over late, because that's what I think he's going to do. And you can't write off his submission game either. I really think people are writing that off too. I think we spoke about this before, but he was in a quintet grappling competition, which is a 5v5, and if you win, you stay on. And he submitted 5 guys in a row.
They
weren't
the highest level, though. Let's be real.
I know, but they were good. They were still good,
True.
though. I'm pretty sure they were still high-level grapplers. Like, I get it. He's a very good... He's a UFC champion. It speaks for itself, right? But it's very impressive and speaks to his cardio as well, to be able to keep that pace up with, a new, fresh opponent.
And he was hungover
every time.
Sorry to interrupt, but he was hungover, yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
I did not know that. Even more proves my point. He's dangerous. And Adesanya's never really been known for his grappling, mainly because he hasn't had to use it, which is, I suppose, to his credit in a lot of ways, because his takedown defense and footwork is that good. But I think Dricus will be the guy to take him down and really pressure him and take him there where no one really has before. Strickland set the pace on him on the feet. I think Dricus can do it on the mat. And we spoke about how difficult it is to become a multiple-time champion. And if Adesanya is to do it again, he will be the first to do it 3 times. And that is an incredible feat. But there's a reason no one's done it before. It's because it's bloody hard. So I think Dricus will just take over the fight gradually. I think it's just his time. It's one of those things. I have a gut feeling it's Dricus' time. The same way we spoke about Bilal. There's just that gut feeling that maybe you feel he might get it done. I know we didn't pick him a couple weeks ago. But as I said, you said the same thing about Sean O'Malley. I just think the same thing about Dricus. I just feel like something's in the air for him to upset the crowd. And this is coming from someone who actually wants Adesanya to win. I'd like to see him back on top again, at least for a little bit longer. Because realistically, we're not going to have him in the sport for too much longer anyway. So I'd like to see him keep the belt, maybe one more time, set another record, and go from there. But yeah, I've got Dricus by decision. I think he'll set the pace, and I think he will take over.
When I think about Izzy coming back, and I'm glad you touched upon the 3-time champion, because I was going to mention that as well, because to me, I would say they're both pretty impressive, but there's a part of me that thinks that's even more impressive than just holding the belt for that consistent amount of time. To be able to get to the peak, drop off, get back to the peak, drop off, rise again. It really says a lot about the mentality of Izzy, and also the skill set as well, and longevity. And
absolutely,
the more you speak about Dricus's conditioning is true, and he's no stranger to 5-round fights. People forget how high his pedigree is outside of the UFC as well. He was fighting 5 rounds. He was fighting in KSW, multiple weight class champion, not some Mickey Mouse feeder league, some high level guys with high level skill sets. So this is a really good matchup, and I can see this going deep, to be perfectly honest, the more I think about it. And I can see it going into the 4th or 5th, and I can see it a little bit like a Kelvin Gastelum. And I think the more I actually think about it, the more I think this could be an absolute razor-close fight where we're really arguing about the nuances of it, whether it's the output of Izzy and maybe the power shots of Dricus. It's a difficult one to call, to be honest, and I like those fights when you have them. But the thing that I would say about Izzy, the last one that I want to mention on this, is he would have made adjustments to his game. He would have done. He just would have done. That's the type of person he is. He's had some time away. But what are they is going to be the question. What are they going to be? Is he going to favour maybe more of a boxing approach? He's been working a lot with his wrestling coach. I know that in this camp. Hickman brothers, or at least Frank Hickman, has come out there a little bit later, but I know they have some good grappling coaches down at City Kickboxing as well. Maybe that's what he looks to do. Maybe he looks to mix up his own grappling. I don't think he's going to look to take him down and try and submit him necessarily, but I think something like that could be a good attack, because he knows as well as we do that Dricus does his homework. Dricus has high IQ. He does come from a good camp, and they managed to study and work out Robert Whittaker. So I think Izzy's got to bring something to the table, at least a small wrinkle which is going to disrupt the apple cart that we haven't seen before, something that maybe they can't game plan for, or at least it's going to be harder to, just so he has to make those in-fight adjustments, because when you have to make them against Izzy and he's picking up on your reads and he's getting his rhythm with his own striking, that's very hard. I wouldn't be shocked if we see something like that from Izzy. At least the level changes. At least him just getting to the hips, not necessarily looking to run blast doubles or single legs down and take him down and submit him, but at least show something different, because he needs to, honestly. There's so much tape on him and there's so much footage, and it's one thing seeing that and another thing fighting against it, of course. But I really do think he's going to have to show something difficult. And I'm still favouring Izzy in this. I'm not. It's one of those that I would not be surprised whatsoever if Dricus wins. I'm not counting him out in the slightest. And to be honest, we made
that mistake too many times. Well,
I said I'll never back again. I said I'll never bet against him. And to be honest, I'm still not really. But it's more so, I can't bet against Izzy when his back's against the wall. That's more of what this comes down to. I don't think it's a Dricus thing. I think it's the moment of Izzy. The fact it's in Australia, the fact it's his return fight, the fact he has a chance to do something no one else has done, that's what gets this man out of bed for the most part. So I think this one's going to be an absolute
There's a reason Contender Izzy is a mythical fighter.
For sure.
There's a reason why.
For sure.
Yeah. And we can go look at the rest of the card. I don't think there's anything too crazy in there. I quite like the co-main event. I actually think people are sleeping on that massively. That's probably my favourite fight on that card, which is, of course, Kai Kara France versus Steve and Urseg. Oh, it's just Steve Urseg, isn't it? Not Steven. But
what was that? What just happened there? I thought you were trying to say a name in the middle. You said Steve.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure. I was like, is it Steve or
lag.
Steven? And I committed, and then I realised, no, it is Steve. Besides the point. It kind of undermines what I was going to say, is that the UFC continue to disrespect flyweights And here I am not even remembering one of the top contenders' first names. So it doesn't really give my point much credibility. But what I was going to say is the UFC 305 countdown did drop. And noticeably, normally they cover the co-main event and sometimes even the third fight down the card. Nada, not one. So, which was a bit disappointing to see because I think we need to give flyweights a chance to shine. And
I haven't seen it yet.
And even more like a problematic with that is you've probably seen a lot of flyweights not even getting re-signed. Obviously, we saw Makayev get shipped off from the UFC, which is still a baffling decision. I know there's probably some factors outside of the fighting which were the cause of that, but even we don't know that at this point. But another one, Nate Maness, who was on...
We do know that.
Do we? Because I know there's some stuff that got disproved.
No,
so
there's nothing that got disproved. I was flipping amongst the drama. That I was there. I felt it. I felt the extra security. I felt how many people they had to have following him. I felt how many security they had to have on other people in the fight week, not just him. I felt the flipping altercation that they had at the hotel. They're the things that he got cut for. A lot of people were saying it's his style and how...
Do you not still think that's unfair, though?
Not really.
How can you say that, though, when guys like John Jones are rocking around?
Because it's
Khabib
John
versus
Jones.
Conor, which was an absolute...
Because it's Khabib.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you being serious?
No, of course I understand it from a business point of view, but do you not understand, the double standard? It's a bit unfair, right?
If we're talking about double standards in the UFC, we're having the wrong conversation. Of course it's double standards. We've known this for however long. If we're talking about they shouldn't have double standards.
Do you think he should have been cut? Because I feel like you can't say yes at that point. Otherwise, you have to be arguing about Conor. Not from a business perspective. Do you reckon?
No, that's silly. Come on. You're not having that argument. Come on.
Well, it's true, isn't it?
You're trying to put Conor McGregor, Khabib and John Jones in the bracket with Makayev in this point of his career.
No, obviously, but I'm not talking from a business perspective. That's my point.
But
obviously, they're going to keep them because they sell money.
It is a business.
Well, morally, then, do you think he should have been cut then?
UFC does not run on moral. If the UFC ran on fairness...
I'm asking you.
Stipe Miocic would not be fighting Tom Aspinall if it ran on fairness. Come on, you know how they operate.
That's what I'm asking you, though. Would you cut Makayev for the reasons they did?
Honestly, there's a lot of things behind the scenes, like what I just mentioned. It's just a ball ache. But if he was Conor McGregor, or not even Conor McGregor, if he was Izzy, if he was Islam, that wouldn't have happened. And does he have the potential to get there with his skill set? 100%. He's one of the most skilled prospects we've ever seen. Like, make no mistake about this.
23.
He's a two-time IMAF champion. He's 35 fights, amateur and professional, undefeated, 7-0 in the UFC. 4 out of his last 7 fights have been finishes. That's why the narrative of his style being boring is false. Of course, he's one of the most incredible. Of course, he's one of the best prospects we have right now. But the UFC look at that and they think, right, is this guy one of the biggest stars in the UFC by numbers? No, he's not. Okay, is he undeniable at flyweight? Well, we don't love that division, so we can keep it pretty hush-hush. So not really. Is he a bit of a ball ache? Yes. So yeah, I get it. I get the decision. Now, do I think it's right? I don't really know, to be honest, because I don't have full scope of it. Do I think he should
be back though?
I think,
I'll say that.
Put it this way. I've been speaking to some people very close to the situation, and he goes away and gets 3 wins. He's back in the UFC.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the guy's only 23. I think you'd be crazy to say otherwise.
3 wins.
I'd still back and say that he'll probably be a UFC champion one day, even if he's not even in the company. I can still say that.
3 wins, 3 good performances, and an apology video. He's back in the UFC.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think it needs to be anything more than that either. Do you know what I mean? I feel like people are going to blow it as they do with a lot of things in this game.
Do you want to hear something crazy?
Shoot.
It may even be beneficial for him.
Yeah, I could see that.
The reason I say that is because this is giving him a ton of press. His media numbers, his metrics, his coverage is better than it's ever been and stronger consistently than it's ever been. I know that because I've been running videos on him. I think he goes away and he's a good striker, don't get twisted. I think he improves his striking and I think he improves his grappling. Not that he's not a fantastic wrestler, but we're getting into the X's and O's a little bit here, but one thing about his grappling, you look at Khabib, the reason why Khabib was so dominant with his grappling is he could be very offensive with his hands, his punches and his elbows because of a lot of his control came with his legs. So it freed up his hands. When you watch Mokaev grapple, sometimes the bit that people are a little bit unsure about is because he can do little damage sometimes with sustained periods of attacks. That's because a lot of his control comes with his hands. So his hands are always locked, usually a body lock in the grappling exchanges. So I think just some small tweaks to his game. He comes back in 3 fights. Guess what? He's 25 years of age. He comes back and absolutely smokes the rest of the division, to be honest. And I think it's a fantastic thing for his career, maybe. At the moment, not great, doesn't look great. But I think in 2-3 years, I think we're looking at this like, that weren't bad, was it?
I agree.
Okay, so we've done the Mokaev topic. That has been a bit of a hot topic for a while. Do think it'll be a good thing for him in the long run. Bit of a hot take at the moment. However, what are some other fights on that card that jump off at you? Because there are some fun ones. There are some fun ones.
Honestly,
Steve Erceg,
not for me.
Kai Kara-France, Steve Erceg's a good fight. What do you think about that one?
Yeah. It's a fun one. It's probably one of the highest skill-wise matchups you can make in that division. But then again, I'd say a lot of the flyweight top 10 are so high level because, I mean, they just are. If you just look at them stylistically. I'm absolutely a huge fan of Steve Erceg, especially after his last fight. I mean, he was probably the closest guy to beating Alexandre Pantoja. And I think if you do that fight again, I think more times than not, he probably does win. He's got youth on his side. Pantoja's nearing the end of his career. And I think he'll probably actually lose his belt maybe in the next fight or two. So Steve Erceg, in no doubt in my mind, will become a UFC champion. I think he's just one of the most well-rounded in the division. He can really take the fight anywhere and have success. And Kai Kara-France probably less so. He's one of those guys that does get caught a lot. We saw Brandon Moreno really sort of outdo him in the striking realm. Looking back on that interim title shot he got. But I'm a big fan of his fighting style. He fights for knockouts, which a lot of guys don't do. And I'll always tune into any of his fights. I'm excited, but if I had to go for an initial pick using my logic and a combination of my gut as well, I think I'm going to go with Steve Erceg. Let's go, decision, I think is a fair call there.
Jog my memory of some other fights that we've got on that card, please, because I've not got it in front of me.
Strike versus somebody. Taito Ivasa. That's a great fight, but there's not much that needs to be said there, is there? Really, you've got two big bastards going at one another, and someone's probably going to go down in the first or second round. That's really how it's going to go, and I'm not going to put any money on it at all because
Taito Ivasa really needs a win there.
He does. Is that how many losses in a row now? 3?
3 or
3 or 4, maybe.
Not 4, is it? It may be 4. Actually.
It might be. I'll check now. So, I mean, thing is, he's one of those guys that win or lose, people are going to watch him anyway, just because he's fun as hell. It is 4 in a row. Garn, Pavlovich, Volkov, Tybura, all 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, 4 losses. Game's cruel.
It's the thing with Ty, it's always been the question, right? Is he's very skilled, very talented, good boxer, lights out power, really good calf kicker, actually. Really good calf kicker, really nimble on his feet, even though he's a big lad. But it's just how seriously does he take his training? How seriously does he take his camp? How invested is he? Because if he is invested, he can beat most of those guys, even though they're some of the very best at heavyweight, the Garns, the Volkovs. Even you look at that Garn fight, he had him in trouble. Let's not forget that.
Yeah,
he had him in a lot of trouble. The most trouble we've ever seen Garn in, to be perfectly honest. And the man's fought Francis Ngannou. So he's got all of the necessary skills. He just needs to work a little bit more on the anti and offensive wrestling, at least showing the level change. And just how invested is he in his camp? Jairzinho Rozenstruik, though, is a bastard because he's a flipping great kickboxer. Again, lights out power. Some of the most finishes in the heavyweight division. It's actually a really good matchup, to be honest, but it's a must win because if you go 0-5 in the UFC, he wouldn't be cut because he's such a fan favorite and it's at heavyweight. So it's kind of like, it makes sense to chuck him in with Mohammed Usman or someone,
the
trenches of the heavyweight division.
Oh God, I don't even want to even think about that.
The Jake Colliers, no offense,
Don't
but
stop it.
Let's just be real.
Yeah.
But he needs that win.
He does.
But on that card,
it is a fun matchup.
On that card, give me another matchup that you like the sound of. Again, I haven't got it in front of me. It's flipping.
Honestly, I was thinking just moving past the card, to be honest with you. There's just some other stuff.
Give me one more. Give me one
more. Yeah, I'll give you one. I mean, Josh Kulabau, Ricardo Ramos. That's a fun one. Or Dan Hooker, Mateus Gamrot.
Brother,
that's a nice stylistic one.
How have you overskipped that?
What? Yeah, sorry. I went back on my tab and the prelims are open, so I didn't see it first. Dan Hooker versus Mateus Gamrot. Yeah, that is a fun one. I think Gamrot probably takes it. I think he probably just out-wrestles him, outworks him. But don't count out Dan Hooker. I made that mistake when he fought Jalen Turner, and he came back from the brink with probably the nastiest head kick I've ever seen. Ate it like it was his lunch and won the fight. So can't rule that man out. Oh my God, that was correct. Good Lord.
Dan Hooker's not too far away either. That's the thing with Dan Hooker, right? Because he's such a big star. He's been in some big events. He's got great brand value, to be honest, in the UFC. He's an absolute veteran and legend at this point in the lightweight division. He's not far away. And you look at Mateus Gamrot, and he's had a tough time of things, because if you actually remember rightly, I remember being in Abu Dhabi and seeing him in the workout area. And the reason he was there is because he was weighing in as the backup fighter for Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski. So if we're going off the logic of the UFC, the man should have already had a title shot. However, he has been overlooked and he gets nothing but the hardest matchups. This is a bit of a classic striker versus grappler, but we actually think of Gamrot's last couple of fights. The one against Fitzeve, he was doing very well on the feet, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. So he does have one of the nastiest single legs in the game. I do anticipate him using his wrestling. But then again, I think Dan Hooker will do a good job of keeping it standing. And if you keep it standing with Dan Hooker, not an easy man to fight. He really isn't. He's tough as nails. He uses that teep kick very effectively. He's got weirdly long arms for the division. Weirdly long arms. And he'll
got the Sean Woodson build.
No, not quite Sean Woodson.
Not even that bad. No one's like him, yeah.
The most rascal daddy long legs build in the UFC, Sean Woodson, is the weirdest shape of a fighter possibly imagine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I know you had some things that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, no, that is a fun fight. But yeah, I was just wanted to look forward because this is kind of a topic. We saw the Apex Center. This is big news for fight fans. The Apex Center is going under construction in some capacity, which means it won't be in use until later next year. And of course, that has resulted in a massive cheer from the fans because, as we know, no one likes an Apex card. And it's really a reaction to a wider problem, which you spoke about many times, about fight fatigue. And it's actually a video I'm going to do, probably a real proper delve into that concept in the coming weeks. So of fan fatigue of the UFC and mixed martial arts as a whole. And on the content creation side of things, it's been quite interesting as well. I don't know if you see this, Lucas Tracey, he just quit MMA YouTube. Just out of nowhere, hit 100k subs, said, peace, I'm done. And I don't think it was necessarily due to the bloated cards and sort of disenfranchisement or feeling disenfranchised with the UFC, but there was a lot of reaction to that as if that was the case. And I completely understand why. And for me, it's been quite a stressful week, just in terms of content creation and trying to figure stuff out and where to take my next steps. And a lot of emailing is stressful. But, and then I saw that retirement video and it made me just think about how I've been feeling all week. And I'm not going anywhere or anything like that. But it just made me do some thinking about, the changes I want to make to my content to keep myself engaged creatively and to find the best path for me to go down in terms of YouTube and expanding and beyond. So yeah, it was just some interesting thoughts. I just wanted to get your take on it because it's been quite an interesting week in terms of when you combine all those things together. The MMA space has been, I don't know, weird. I think that's just the word I'd use, is a little bit weird.
I think the truth of it is whenever, not just in the MMA space, but obviously we're going to use that for context because that's what we're in. When anyone typically looks at content creators in any vicinity, people always think naturally it's easy or it's an easy way to make money, or not necessarily an easy way to make money or a fun way to make money, or people are just making videos and waffling and they're getting paid all of these ad revenues, and that's a great thing to do. I would love to do that. But I think the truth of it is, and the more people that I actually speak to in the sport, so the athletes, the coaches, people like that are looking to branch out and make their own content, people realize after a little while how hard it is. It's very, very taxing. Very taxing. You have to always be on. If you want to make consistent content, it's like anything, right? It's like anything. If you want to be the 0.1%, you have to act like the 0.1%. So there, of course, are a million content creators, and contextually in MMA, there's a million content creators. But to be the 0.1%, you have to act like that. So your output, your consistency, your quality, the way that you level up, it all has to be in reflection to the top percentile. So I think people can sometimes look at these things on a surface level and think, that's easy. I'd like to do that. That sounds fun. I'd like to do that for a job. But then you actually get into it and it's very difficult. Very, very
it's
difficult.
Fucking hard, man.
You have to be on all the time if you want to do this stuff seriously. You always have to be absorbing the news. You always have to be absorbing what people are doing and how you can evolve your own game. You always have to be looking at your own brand and how you can level up, and it becomes exhausting. It really does become exhausting.
It all falls on your shoulders. That's what people don't realize. You're not doing it for anyone else. There's no innate sort of expectation. You have to find that motivation to do all of these things off your own back within, you know, the time frames that you set. You have to hold yourself to the highest of standards to actually succeed in this, and that is probably, I'd say, is the hardest part, because it means you have to be so driven. But the drawback to that is the burnout, right? And trying to avoid that and just finding that right balance, because that is so hard to do, especially when you might have a month where it's particularly bad, or in terms of your revenue and your view counts or whatever. And obviously we don't like to judge everything by that. But at the end of the day, at the bottom line, that's how you make a living if you're doing something like this. So it does innately matter. So it's about being able to tackle those obstacles and dealing with that stress that comes with perhaps not having a as successful week or month, and looking at it from a wider perspective as saying, you know, this is just a minor dip in a larger climb, right? So it's stressful, man.
It comes back to, so for Lucas Tracey, I know what he does in regards to his content. Not too familiar with it. Can't say I've ever watched it, but knew that he was debater, let's say, on YouTube, had a good community, drew a lot of good attention, grew a lot of audience, and people probably don't quite realize how much work that is, how much time commitment that is. And one thing that people don't realize, one thing that they certainly don't realize, is energy. To have that energy level throughout a 20-minute video every single day, multiple times a day, is very draining. And that's when you look at the old YouTubers from 2009 that blew up then, and you hear them on podcasts now talk about how they just got burnt out with becoming these people. So you have to find this balance of an authentic self and how you can be your authentic self consistently without just getting flipping sick and tired of it. Sometimes people say on my videos, they say, why do you sound like that? Or I've heard you on other things and you don't sound like that. It's because you have to you don't have to, but if I go in there and give it 100% high energy, my most energized self, it's not really me, because I would always do it authentically. But if I make 15 videos a day, every day, 365 days a year, it's not sustainable. You have to do these things sustainably. And I think sometimes as well, and I don't necessarily know the case with this Lucas Tracey at all, but what I would guess with some of these people is when you are very honed into one thing, this is what we spoke about before, when you're very honed into one thing, like talking about fights, fight breakdowns, fight reactions, postcard, pre-card. Someone like MMA Guru is a fantastic example.
I mean, they're basically the same, in terms of what they do. So, it makes sense.
I can very easily see how that becomes exhausting and very draining.
I think we spoke about that a while ago, actually, because we both agreed that guy is not happy. 100%. I put my money on it that he's not happy.
That's a bit intense. I don't know about.
I don't think it is. Honestly, I don't, because he doesn't do anything but stream all the time, and that's no way to live. Yeah, it's subjective, isn't it?
To you,
again, it's a bold assumption.
Also, not to get too pedantic, but happiness and sadness is is a temporary state. It's not a consistent state.
Yes.
So it's more of a question, is he peaceful? And I've heard him say before that there's nothing
Content.
he'd rather do. Content. There's nothing he'd rather do than sit at home, watch fights and talk about fights. So if we're going off of that, then I would say, yeah, he's pretty content. He has a fantastic income. He has a fantastic community.
Yeah.
And he's doing the thing that he loves. So, yeah, he may have days where he thinks, oh, this is a bit long, can't really be asked for work today. Yeah, that will happen for most people. But when you zoom out and think, all right, mate, would you rather do this or would you rather go down the local call centre and work in a grey building 8 till 5 every day and hate your soulless life? Probably a fair alternative, to be honest. So it comes back to, you have to understand, not just in this, but in general,
Yeah.
why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? This is the bigger question. It's not, this is what you really have to understand, whether you're Lucas Tracey, MMA guru, ourselves, whether you're someone that's starting in this content creation game, whatever it may be, why are you doing it? If you can answer that, then it will become easier because you can reverse engineer it. If you're just, why am I doing it? Oh, because I saw someone get a few views and I know they made some money. You've already failed. That's obvious. You've already failed. So there has to be a bigger why to it. And sometimes I think with some people, when their why is a little bit cloudy, or maybe they don't exactly know what they enjoy outside of that, it can become very exhausting. I've gone on a bit of a rant there, but it is true.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think everyone's a little bit like that. I'm that capacity. Sometimes I wonder why. Maybe I'm having a bad day. Like this week's been so stressful, and I was just wondering, like, why am I even doing this? Like, it was really tough. This week's probably one
Answer
of
the
the
question,
toughest.
though.
What do you mean?
Why are you doing it?
Yeah, I still don't really know. I mean, I do because I like the fulfillment of building something up off my own back. That's my most fulfilling fit path, I guess is the phrase to use. But and of course I like MMA, so I guess it's combining those two things together. But it's, you know, I think you just have to accept the drawbacks and the responsibilities because you have a lot of them. When you're doing this all yourself, this is part of the game. I always say this to you, we can't sit here and complain because this is what we sign up for. You know, you want to build something yourself, you've got to be willing to put the work in every avenue to do so. So
you'll never catch me complaining about it.
Yeah. No, exactly. We just can't do that. We can sit here and say how sometimes it's tough, but we can't go saying, you know.
No, I can say it's tough
anymore.
because
Yeah.
you need to be realistic. You need to be realistic. Is it easy to just at the very, very, very bare minimum create 12 videos a day? No, that's not easy. Like, that's not easy. And that's just the absolute base.
Yeah.
That's just absolute base.
That's
like,
your
okay,
base.
I do nothing else today.
Older.
So that, of course, that's not easy. But in regards to creating this brand, creating this business, creating different avenues that come off there, there's nothing that I'd rather be doing. That's why I've engineered it this way. This has not been just on a whim, last year, maybe no, this has been years, since I was like 10 years of age, so many different elements that I'm trying to essentially curate under the brand of Casuals Corner. It's much bigger than that. I've always said that. It's a 10, 20-year play. Yes, it may look like content creation and a few videos here, and it started off with just some crap clips, me just using clips and just putting some out. That's where it started off. So what I'm saying to people, it's a 20-year play, it's a media outlet, and it's this brand that's going, of course that sounds weird, and that's just when it's like clips global. Exactly. And then it just slowly over time it gets less weird, and then I go and do Food Fighters episodes now with fighters, and it sounds less weird when I say that. And now I travel to Thailand and work for One and work in gyms, and now it sounds less weird, and now I'm able to do it full time, and now it sounds less weird, and we're just 3 years in, you know. So you have to also play the long game. I think people drastically overestimate what they can do in 1 year and drastically underestimate what they can do in 10. And I think anyone that you listen to that's successful in anything, whether it be business, whether it be health, whether it be a sport, whether it be anything at a top 0.1%, it takes 10 years to build anything meaningful. And this is no different. You look at YouTubers, you look at content creators, because that's what we're in, it's 10 years at a minimum. Serve your time. You have to serve your time. And if you're not where you want to be and you haven't done it for 10 years, shut up. It's as simple as that. Shut up, work harder, work smarter, and stop complaining.
bombshell, mic drop. If you have one, you should drop it right now. I wish you had a microphone with you so you could do that, because that's a lot. That'll do. That's fucking up. That's a bombshell way to wrap it up. It is a little bit premature, but I literally, speaking of a lot of stuff to do, I literally have to jump on a stream in about 5 minutes. So we're going to wrap it up there. This has been the MMA Critters podcast, episode number 63. And we will see you next Sunday. Cheers.